Okay, let's unpack this incredible stack of source material you sent over. We have excerpts here from a novel titled By Reason of Insanity
Right.
by Randy Singer.
Hmm.
And this isn't just any book. It's a legal thriller that really gets into some incredibly complex, uh, challenging areas. Criminal defense, mental health.
Vigilantism, the justice system itself. Yeah,
It's got a lot going on.
it really does. Think of the source material as giving us, a front row seat to two major legal battles.
Right.
And they're interwoven with this terrifying series of dark, connected crimes. And we see it all through the eyes of the characters caught right in the middle.
So our mission for this deep dive really is to guide you through this intricate plot. We're going to try and identify the key players.
Understand what makes them tick, their motivations.
Exactly. Explore the legal strategies at play, especially that fascinating and often controversial insanity defense.
Yeah, that's central.
And highlight the surprising twists and turns that, well, make this story so compelling. It's about pulling out the key stuff, the essential briefing.
Giving you the director's cut, almost, without needing to read every single page.
Right. And at its core, this story really forces you to confront a fundamental tension, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How does the formal justice system, with all its rules and procedures, how does it really grapple with profound trauma, with a person's mental state?
Especially when you put that system right up against someone taking justice into their own hands.
Someone convinced they're right. That stark contrast.
Exactly. So let's jump right into the first major legal battle we encounter in these sources.
Okay. This one centers around the trial of Annie Newberg.
Right.
She's accused of killing her husband, Richard Hofstadter Jr.
And her defense attorney is actually her brother, Quinn Newberg.
Mm-hmm.
And his strategy, right off the bat, is focused on the devastating impact of severe abuse on Annie.
Yeah, he brings up her history, even mentioning abuse by her father dating way back.
July 4th, 1986, it mentions.
Right. Arguing in court that, look, if she'd shot him in self-defense back then, nobody would blame her.
And he uses evidence like photos of her after a domestic disturbance call involving her husband to really underscore that trauma.
But the source material, it doesn't shy away from the details of the killing itself.
No, it doesn't.
Annie's confession, as it's presented in court, describes her making Richard Hofstadter Jr. kneel
And beg.
and beg before shooting him execution style, right in the forehead.
It's brutal. And it really complicates any simple self-defense claim.
Definitely. So Quinn brings in a psychiatric expert, Dr. Rosemarie Mancini,
Ah, yes, she sounds like quite a character.
described as diminutive but flamboyant, sharp wit.
A real presence in the courtroom.
Seems like it. And Dr. Mancini's testimony supports this idea that Annie repressed these horrors, created an alternative reality, maybe a dream world, just to cope with all the abuse.
Okay, so that's the defense angle. But on the prosecution side,
You have Carla Duncan, and she's pushing hard for premeditated murder, no question about it in her mind.
and what's her evidence for that?
Well, she points to Annie sending her daughter away the night of the killing,
Okay.
the execution-style shot itself, and the fact that Annie immediately called both 911 and her lawyer brother.
Right. Which Duncan argues shows planning. Shows that Annie knew what she was doing was wrong.
Exactly. She also questions how convenient it was that the gun, supposedly Richard's, was just unsecured in his closet.
Prosecutor Duncan really emphasizes that point,
Huh.
even if the victim was a terrible person.
Which the prosecution even concedes he was, an abuser and womanizer.
The law doesn't let individuals become judge, jury, and executioner. It raises that core tension we talked about right away.
It really does. And the judge, in this case, Judge Ronnie Strackman, Quinn perceives him as maybe reluctant to rule, sometimes favoring the prosecution.
And Quinn suspects maybe his firm's political spending has something to do with that.
Yeah, it adds that layer of sort of systemic complexity, or at least the perception of it.
So you've got Quinn arguing for a defense based on his sister's, well, broken mental state from the trauma.
Essentially using the concept behind the book's title, By Reason of Insanity.
Right. Against the prosecution's case for a calculated, premeditated act. This really highlights that challenge in the legal system, doesn't it? Proving someone's internal state of mind.
Oh, absolutely. At the exact moment of the crime. It's incredibly difficult.
And the atmosphere in court.
Described as incredibly tense, the jury deliberations drag on.
Pressure cooker?
Totally. And the victim's family is there, very outspoken, critical of both sides.
There's that detail about Juror 5, a single mother, crying during the proceedings.
Yeah, it shows the emotional weight on the people who actually have to make the decision.
So what's the outcome of this first trial?
Annie Newberg is found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Wow. Ooh.
Yeah, it's a huge moment. Results in massive press attention. You see that reporter, Catherine O'Rourke, covering it.
Right, the source mentions her.
And she notes how some might feel insanity carried the day.
And the consequences for Annie.
She's required to get psychiatric treatment, but legally, this verdict also means she's eligible to inherit from her husband's estate.
Which just adds another layer of complication.
Always more layers.
So that's the first major legal battle, really focused on the insanity defense. But then, almost immediately, or maybe running in parallel,
Yeah, it seems parallel.
the sources introduce a completely different and much darker series of crimes.
Yes. This is where we meet the Avenger of Blood, a serial killer operating separately, carrying out this string of kidnappings and murders.
And the targets are deeply disturbing.
Horrifying. Individuals connected to rape cases like Paul Donaldson.
And his lawyer, Rex Archibald.
Right. And a woman named Sherry McNamara is mentioned, raped by Donaldson. His lawyer argued it was consensual, that she liked it rough.
Just awful.
Mhm.
But then the initial victims seem to be kidnapped babies.
Yes. The Carver twins, Kellyanne and Chi Yang, adopted from China. The notes mention twin adoptions, especially a boy, were rare then. And another baby, Rashad Milburn.
Yeah. And the methods.
Meticulous.
Yeah.
And chilling. The killer uses a fast-acting, potent anesthetic, methohexadol,
How potent.
described as nearly 3 times stronger than the sodium thiopental used in lethal injections.
Whoa.
We see it used on victims like Marcia Carver. She's also choked and injected. And Paul Donaldson, who's tasered first, then injected.
And then there's a little beige.
Yeah.
The electric chair setup.
Yeah. The sources describe Paul Donaldson being strapped down, bald spots shaved for the electrodes,
2 on the skull, 1 on the calf.
and current applied for exactly 10 minutes.
And that timing is significant.
Explicitly noted as the same amount of time it took him to rape and murder Sherry McNamara.
My God. It's like a twisted, personal form of retribution.
It's framed as a botched execution, causing violent struggles, internal damage, burn marks. It really speaks to a deep-seated, maybe even unskilled, but definitely personal motivation.
And Evanger leaves notes.
Cryptic notes, yeah.
Yeah.
Often quoting the Bible, like Exodus 20.5, about visiting the iniquities of fathers upon children. And there's a specific detail about a note and a piece of Chi Ying's bloodstained blanket being sent to the Carver twins' father.
Just incredibly cool.
Absolutely. And the killer puts elaborate effort into avoiding detection. No footprints, no fingerprints, no DNA initially. Using public library computers, buying money orders from different stores to pay people. Like, it mentions paying Rex Archibald, the lawyer who was later killed. Suggests he might have been involved somehow facilitating something.
Okay, so this is happening, and Catherine O'Rourke, the reporter,
Yeah, the one who covered Annie's trial. She re-enters the picture here.
she's covering these Avenger crimes now.
In Virginia Beach, yeah. We see her tacking photos of the missing twins onto her office wall. She's invested.
And then she starts having these visions.
Really unsettling visions related to the crimes. A stroller morphing into an electric chair with children inside.
Oh, that's disturbing.
Handwriting on a wall that she later recognizes from the Avengers' actual notes. This is where the psychological element really takes a sharp, different turn.
And her connection to the case goes from reporter to much more serious, fast.
Very quickly. She publishes a front-page article saying the Carver kidnapping isn't isolated, leaking info law enforcement wanted kept quiet.
Uh-oh. That gets her into trouble.
Big trouble. Subpoenaed to a grand jury to reveal her source.
Does she?
Nope. She refuses.
So what happens?
Threatened with contempt by the prosecutor, Boyd Gates, her initial lawyer confirms it. Judge Rosencrantz holds a hearing,
Yeah.
holds her in contempt, and sends her to jail until she reveals the source or a suspect is caught.
Wow. Judge Rosencrantz states it's urgent for the kidnapping investigation, but still, jail.
Yeah, and her experience in jail is portrayed as incredibly harsh.
How so?
The orange jumpsuit, losing her identity, solitary at first, then general population, zero privacy, open showers, open toilets.
Just nozzles on a wall, it says.
Right. Stainless steel toilets out in the open, strict routine, 4:30 a.m. wake-up, inspections, lockdowns, clean clothes once a week.
And she's having nightmares in there, too.
Disturbing nightmares and visions, the electric chair, the twins. She fires her first lawyer, hires Mark Boland.
And the media jumps on it.
Oh, yeah. They dub her the Bikini Killer based on footage of her arrest. Even her neighbors are quoted, shocked, scared.
She gets attacked in jail.
Yeah, by a cellmate, Holly Stevenson. But Catherine fights back, gains some respect from an inmate group called the Widows. Boland gets the attack removed. It just adds to the pressure.
And then the physical evidence against her starts piling up.
Yeah, this is where it gets really bad for her. Forensics finds mitochondrial DNA mashing her hair on the flap of an Avenger Note envelope.
Okay, that's bad.
And bloody paper towels with Paul Donaldson's blood and Catherine's saliva found in her neighbor's trash.
Her neighbor's trash. And saliva.
Doesn't explain how, just that it was found there. Plus, a vial of the anesthetic, the methotrexate.
Also in the neighbor's trash. This sounds like a setup.
It looks incredibly suspicious, right? And the prosecution starts using her visions against her.
Arguing they show she knew details only the killer could know.
Exactly. Biblical quotes. The electrocution method. And to top it all off, no alibi for the crime dates.
Man, it looks incredibly bad for Catherine.
It really does. And that's when her lawyer, Mark Boland, reaches out to Quinn Newberg.
Because of Quinn's recent success with the insanity defense in Annie's trial.
Precisely.
Is Quinn eager to jump in?
Understandably hesitant. The evidence is, formidable. DNA, the drug, the visions.
It's complex and lacks a clear motive from a standard perspective.
Right. Plus, Quinn's dealing with pressure from his own firm. The managing partner, Robert Espinoza,
Doesn't like insanity cases.
expresses disdain for insanity plea work, worries if clients can even pay, pushing Quinn towards more profitable stuff.
Even though Quinn argues his track record should be enough.
Yeah, there's that internal firm tension, too.
But Quinn agrees to consider it.
Despite the challenges, yeah. He brings Dr. Rosemary Mancini back into the picture to evaluate Catherine.
Mancini again.
And Mancini gives a working diagnosis. Dissociative identity disorder. DID.
But with a caveat.
A big one. She makes it clear this is contingent on the forensic evidence being reliable. She's using the DSM-IV manual, the standard at the time.
And she explains DID.
The basics, yeah. How it can cause a fracturing into alter personalities, usually from childhood abuse, she says 85% of cases.
But not always.
Right. She stresses that 15% can come from other major trauma, and she links Catherine's potential DE to the trauma of her college rape. The memory of being raped by someone she loved, maybe his friends too.
Okay, so the rape trauma is the proposed trigger.
And here's where Mancini makes this really fascinating connection. It becomes central to the defense theory.
What is it?
She finds out Catherine studied ancient concepts of blood avengers.
Like the Greek Furies?
Exactly. The Furies, biblical avengers, linked to Mosaic law in a comparative religion course in college.
And the timing.
The same year she was raped.
Wow. Okay. That's
No,
sadistic. So Mancini hypothesizes that this study, combined with the intense trauma, could have influenced a potential alter personality, the Avenger of Blood. An alter may be frozen in time, connected to that trauma period.
Possibly. And perhaps triggered or amplified later by covering Annie Newberg's trial. Seeing Annie, maybe, as a kind of modern female fury.
She even talked to Catherine's old professor about this.
Yeah, Dr. Channing. Trying to piece together that potential link.
And what about Catherine's visions? How does Mancini explain those?
Well, she opens the door to them not being just psychological, maybe spiritual or telepathic.
Really?
Yeah, she references the concept of a revealer of mysteries from the Book of Daniel. She seems more open to spiritual angles than purely scientific ones found in books Catherine was reading.
Interesting. And Quinn's reaction to that, he seemed pretty grounded before.
Initially skeptical, yeah. If you couldn't touch it, it wasn't real for him. But the source suggests he starts considering Mancini's perspective more over time.
So, Mancini agrees to evaluate Catherine.
Against her better judgment, she says, but yes. Especially after Quinn assures her about payment, mentioning the check sent for Annie's case.
And Mancini sees Quinn as key.
Calls him Catherine's white knight. Thinks he might be the only one who can convince Catherine to plead insanity, given Catherine really wants to prove her actual innocence.
So the strategy is set. Quinn and Boland are going for an insanity defense based on DID.
Arguing an alter personality committed the crimes, not Catherine's core self.
Yeah.
It's a huge uphill battle with all that evidence.
And while this is unfolding, Quinn's personal life gets incredibly complicated. And dangerous.
Yeah, really dangerous. He's gained temporary custody of his niece, Sierra, Annie's daughter, while Annie's in psychiatric treatment post-trial.
He's trying to provide stability for her.
Exactly. Explaining her mom made a mistake, but we'll be okay. Trying to keep things normal.
But then he gets attacked.
Physically assaulted. by two men hired by Richard Hofstadter Sr., the father of the man Annie killed.
Where? How?
Cornered in a crowded tunnel, kidney punch, neck nerve squeezed, warned to show a little respect.
Annie gets injured.
Suffers a torn rotator cuff. Deep tear, confirmed by MRI. Doctor says recovery could be months, maybe surgery needed.
What's the motive behind the attack?
Seems tied to control of Richard Jr.'s interest in the Oasis casino. A limited partnership interest described as crucial for a big casino development.
And how does that connect?
If Annie's convicted, she's disqualified from inheriting. The interest might pass to Sierra, potentially benefiting Hofstadter Sr. through Tanner, Sierra's biological father.
Okay, so it's about money and control. Quinn hires a PI.
Yeah, Billy Long. To dig into Hofstadter Sr.'s business dealings, the casino interest.
And Quinn uses this whole dangerous situation as leverage.
He does. He negotiates this really complex deal involving Hofstadter Sr. and Tanner, Sierra's biological dad.
What's Quinn's priority?
Securing Sierra's long-term custody and stability. He argues she can't handle a custody fight or being forced to connect with a father she doesn't even know.
So what's the deal he proposes?
He offers to waive his right to contest custody if Annie is ultimately convicted, guilty but mentally ill. Tanner would get sole custody, Quinn gets visitation.
And in return?
Tanner agrees not to file for custody until Annie's case is totally resolved. If Annie's acquitted by reason of insanity, which already happened, she gets permanent custody. Tanner gets reasonable visitation.
And he tells Hofstadter Sr. he wants a deal. We can all win.
Yeah, basically using his knowledge of Hofstadter Sr.'s schemes involving Tanner and the casino interest as a bargaining chip for Sierra's stability. It shows the incredibly high stakes outside Catherine's trial itself.
Okay, so defense prepping for Catherine's trial, overwhelming evidence, Quinn navigating family drama, danger, high-stakes deals. The stage is set.
Absolutely. Catherine's trial begins, and the tension is palpable.
Protesters outside?
Yeah, like Reverend Harold Pryor calling her a baby killer. Media everywhere. Quinn's trying hard to keep his cool after snapping at Pryor the day before.
And the prosecutor, Boyd Gates, opens strong.
Very strong. Frames it clearly. Premeditated murder, not insanity. He quotes the legal definition, saying insanity can't excuse premeditation.
And he hammers the cover-up evidence.
Exactly. Dumping the trash, destroying her laptop, argues it proves she knew right from wrong. Standard prosecution tactic in insanity cases.
And he attacks Mancini's credibility.
Directly. Mentions she also testified Annie Newberg was insane, trying to paint her as a sort of go-to insanity expert for the defense.
And dismisses the DID diagnosis for Catherine.
Calls it unlikely from a single rape, usually needs persistent childhood abuse. Calls the Avenger persona a mythical creation, a ruse to get away with murder.
And lays out the forensic evidence again.
The hair, the methahexidol, the bloody paper towels with Donaldson's blood and her saliva, lack of alibi, missing clothes. It's a powerful case on paper.
How does Quinn react during this?
Pushes back where he can, makes some sarcastic comments that earn rebukes from the judge.
Like the one about prosecutors making objections in Vegas.
Right. But also lands points, like challenging Gates's narrow definition of the trauma needed for D-Day, arguing rape isn't just an isolated, non-recurring episode.
Okay, so the prosecution starts calling witnesses.
First, Dr. Saunders, the medical examiner, describes the gruesome details of Donaldson's electrocution, emphasizes the violent struggle, implying the killer was unskilled, cruel.
Olin objects.
Tries to frame it as speculation, overruled. Tries to ask if only an insane person would inflict such torture, but that objection is sustained. Saunders isn't a psychiatrist.
Then Jamarcus Webb testifies, the investigator.
Yeah. He talks about the Avengers methods, the notes showing premeditation, and then Gates asks about Webb's relationship with Catherine.
This could be tricky, given he was her source.
But Webb, or maybe Gates guiding him, frames it cleverly. Webb states they were friends, and she went to jail to protect him.
Turning it around.
Exactly. Portraying his testimony as unbiased despite their friendship, making him seem more credible because she protected him, it flips a potential weakness.
Wow. That's smart prosecution. And then the cellmate testifies. Tasha.
Yeah, this is potentially devastating. Tasha claims Catherine discussed faking an alter personality for her case.
No.
And says Catherine showed her a sharpened toothbrush, hidden as a weapon, a shank. Tasha reported it after being moved.
How does Quinn counter that?
Cross-examination highlights Tasha's motivation. She might be getting a deal. Facing a third felony, long sentence. Testifying against Catherine could get her a misdemeanor instead. trying to show she has reason to lie.
Okay, so that's the prosecution's case.
Yeah.
Then the defense presents.
They call Dr. Rosemary Mancini.
Back again.
She explains D-Bidet, defends her diagnosis of Catherine, counters the prosecution expert's point, Dr. Chow mentioned earlier, about rape not being a sufficient trigger, citing that 15% statistic for other traumas.
And she brings up the Blood Avenger course again.
Details the connection between Catherine's trauma and her college studies as a possible origin point for the altar. Mentions meeting with Professor Channing.
Does she compare Catherine's case to Annie's?
Notes Catherine covered Annie's trial, where Mancini also testified, but points out the scenarios are different.
And the money issue. Espinosa's concern.
Mancini addresses it head-on. States she's billed $19,000 but collected zero, trying to appear credible, not just a hired gun making things up.
Does she claim to have actually seen the Avenger altar?
No. She admits she hasn't surfaced the altar yet, but believes it's possible after the trial stress lifts. She also pushes back on Gates's idea that Catherine would be an expert on insanity defenses from covering trials, noting how rarely it's actually used.
Okay, so the defense rests its case. But then things get really wild.
Absolutely stunning turns. Completely upend everything just as the trial is wrapping up.
Quinn's PI, Billy Long, makes a discovery.
An incredible discovery. One of the kidnapped Carver twins, Chi Ying, he's alive.
Alive? Where?
Found in Los Angeles, sold through a black market adoption ring. He's with a good family now, but...
But the person who delivered him to the ring is unknown.
Exactly. Still a mystery.
Okay, this is huge news, but it presents a massive problem for the defense, right?
Huge ethical and strategic dilemma. Quinn and Boland realize immediately this discovery crushes the insanity defense. Selling a baby implies careful planning, financial motive, not a trauma-induced psychosis acting out vengeance. It looks like cold, calculated action over time. Deception.
And it makes Catherine look like she lied about her visions.
Exactly. The visions of the babies being killed in the electric chair, now they look like a deliberate fabrication to support an insanity plea.
So what do Quinn and Boland decide to do?
They make an incredibly difficult call. They decide not to reveal this information immediately during the trial.
Why not? Isn't there an obligation?
They believe they have no legal obligation at that moment, and strategically, they think introducing it now guarantees a guilty verdict. It makes Catherine look like a liar or a cold-blooded criminal.
They prioritize her immediate defense over revealing the baby is a lie.
Yes. They advise Catherine to trust their objectivity, trust them, even though she's deeply concerned about the baby's safety if they delay.
Wow. That's a heavy decision.
Immense pressure. And then, amidst the secret, something even more shocking happens. In the courtroom. During a sidebar, Catherine turns to Quinn and tells him she knows he killed Richard Hofstadter Jr.
What?
She says she saw it in a vision.
Quinn must be absolutely floored.
Completely blindsided, reeling, but he has to keep it together legally.
What does he do?
Requests another sidebar with the judge. Says he's discovered evidence that might require changing Catherine's plea.
Meaning her knowledge about him?
And evidence that might require him to withdraw as counsel. He can't fully explain why, obviously, but he has to put it on the record somehow.
This is unbelievable, and the jury is deliberating during all this.
Yes, and they return with their verdict, after everything.
What is it?
They find Catherine O'Rourke guilty. Why?
Oh, man.
Devastated.
Feels like a total defeat. But then, this unbelievable moment happens.
During sentencing. Yeah.
Juror Marcia Carver, remember her name, maybe related to the victims, interrupts. She stands up, declares the jury didn't mean Catherine was guilty.
But someone else.
Points and says, him.
Pointing at who? Well, in the chaos that follows, the shocking truth unravels. Jamarcus Webb, the investigator. He confirms to Quinn that he'd been transmitting his conversations with Catherine to an ally of Mark Boland's.
Boland, Catherine's lawyer.
Yes. And he identifies the ally as Billy Long.
Quinn's PI.
Quinn's PI, who turns out was actually working for Boland the whole time, feeding Boland information used in the scheme.
So Boland is exposed.
Exposed. He lures Quinn onto his boat, the class action. Billy Long is there too.
And Boland confesses.
He confesses. He is the Avenger of Blood. Tells Quinn, I'm not the Avenger you thought I was. I'm the judge and jury.
His motive?
A twisted form of vigilante justice against those he sees as corrupt, evil. Rapists like Donaldson, lawyers like Rex Archibald who defend them or maybe obstruct justice, That sweet taste of revenge mentioned earlier.
And he admits framing Catherine.
He admits everything. Orchestrating the setup, planting the DNA, the methohexadyl, using Billy Long to help stage events like Donaldson's death, maybe track victims.
And he tries to kill Quinn.
Tries to kill him using the electric chair setup he has on the boat.
Unbelievable.
Chillingly tells Quinn it's a relatively painless death, like Richard Hofstadter Jr.'s.
Implying.
Strongly implying Boland killed Richard Jr., not Annie. Staging that scene, too.
And Boland admits setting up Reverend Pryor.
And Catherine tells Quinn that by dying, Quinn might actually save his sister's life.
Revealing his endgame was to frame Quinn for Richard Jr.'s murder after killing him on the boat, protecting Annie's fabricated innocence.
Exactly. But thankfully,
Marcus Webb.
Jamarcus Webb, suspicious after the verdict, maybe influenced by Catherine's vision of Quinn in the chair, he followed them onto the boat.
And he intervenes.
Bursts in, saves Quinn, stops Boland.
Wow. Just wow.
So with Boland's confession and arrest, the case against Catherine completely collapses.
Prosecutor Gates has to act.
Immediately moves to dismiss all charges against her. Judge Rosencrantz grants the motion. Catherine O'Rourke is finally free.
But what about Quinn? And the truth about Richard Hofstadter Jr.'s death?
Quinn reveals his incredible secret. That confession he typed up, intended as a backup plan to protect Annie and Sierra if things went south.
He actually wrote one.
Yes, he details how he staged the scene. Used plastic gloves, wiped the gun handle, put Hofstadter's hand on it for prints, only handed the gun to Annie after he left so she could call the police with it in her hand.
He really planned it all to protect her.
Completely. And he sends this confession via fax to prosecutor Carla Duncan back in Las Vegas.
What's her reaction?
She gives him 24 hours to turn himself in for questioning.
So Quinn's facing charges now. But first, he deals with Hofstadter Sr.
Uses his leverage one last time. Meets Hofstadter Sr. at the Rogue Casino. Reviews his knowledge of Richard Jr.'s crucial Oasis casino interest and Hofstadter Sr.'s scheming with Tanner.
And the recording.
Uses a recording he made of Hofstadter Sr.'s phone call, facilitating that earlier custody deal with Tanner.
And negotiates the final deal for Sierra.
Hofstadter Sr. agrees to call off Tanner's custody claim permanently. In exchange for securing Sierra's custody with Annie and Quinn, no interference. Quinn won't contest Tanner's claim on the casino interests.
Allowing Hofstadter Sr. to get his big casino deal.
Right. Quinn gives him a time limit, gets confirmation from Annie that Hofstadter called Tanner off, tells Hofstadter, we have a deal, secure Sierra's future.
And Catherine, after her release.
She has one final powerful vision, while tying her ruler blades of all things.
What does she see?
An argument, a gunshot, and Quinn Newberg standing over Richard Hofstadter Jr.'s body, wiping down a gun.
Confirming the truth, Quinn told her. And confessed.
Exactly, that he killed Richard Jr. to protect Annie, staging it to look like her act after abuse.
How does she process all this?
She talks with Rosemaria Mancini again. They meet in colonial Williamsburg near William and Mary, where Catherine went to college.
Is Mancini surprised by Quinn's actions? Or his confession?
Not surprised by his actions. Says it was undoubtedly part of Quinn's plan all along, that he never intended to let Annie stay in jail. But Mancini also reveals something crucial.
What?
She knew Annie killed her husband.
What?
Annie confessed the truth to Mancini. It happened exactly the way Annie described it in court. So Quinn's confession about him doing it was false, designed only to protect Annie if needed.
Oh my God. So Annie did do it, confessed to Mancini, but Quinn was prepared to take the fall anyway.
That seems to be the implication. Mancini helps Catherine understand Quinn's complex motivations, his willingness to sacrifice himself.
And Mancini offers a different take on Catherine's visions now.
Frames them not just psychologically, but potentially spiritually again, the revealer of mysteries. Maybe the visions were meant just for Catherine's understanding about Quinn's character, his willingness to sacrifice.
Telling her it's okay to follow her heart towards him.
That's the suggestion. Not necessarily for legal use, especially since revealing Quinn's false confession, which everyone now thinks is true except Mancini and maybe Catherine, would send Annie, the actual killer, to jail.
The layers just keep unfolding.
Right to the very end. The story concludes with Catherine reflecting on everything. The endurance needed, the flawed characters, the blurred lines between justice, revenge, sanity.
And there's that hint of a possible future connection between Quinn and Catherine.
Yeah, Quinn tells her, I always thought you were a little crazy. A complex ending note.
It's truly an intricate journey we've traced here. From that first domestic murder trial and the insanity defense.
Through a terrifying serial killer, the avenger of blood, a false accusation, corrupt figures pulling strings.
High stakes, legal and personal maneuvering, custody battles, casino interests, it's got everything.
It really packs it in.
You brought us these sources, and by deep diving into them, we've really seen just how many layers can exist beneath the surface of a story like this, especially one tangled up in the legal system.
Mm-hmm. It makes you think, doesn't it? About how we even try to determine truth and guilt.
Who we choose to trust. And the extraordinary, sometimes, well, illegal lengths people will go to protect the ones they love.
And it definitely leaves you with some challenging questions to ponder.
Absolutely. Based on this story's exploration of visions, trauma, mental illness, and what different characters see as justice. What does it mean to be truly just in a world where trauma can fundamentally shape someone's perception of reality?
Where do you draw the line between illness and responsibility?
Right. And maybe even tougher. When the formal system seems to fail or seems corrupt, can stepping outside the law ever be justified in pursuing your own definition of justice?
That's something to really mull over, a really provocative thought to end on.